Hello everyone and welcome to yet another great SPDocKit webinar. Today we are going to talk about comparing different SharePoint farms with SPDocKit, how you can utilize our tool to better manage your farms, compare different snapshots, compare permissions and web configs. My name is Tony and I will be guiding you through this presentation. I'm one of the co-founders and product owner of SPDocKit. Our company is called Acceleratio. We are making different system tools for not just SharePoint admins, but also Windows admins and Office 365 admins. I have been working here for 7 years now, and I have extensive experience in Microsoft ecosystem and especially in SharePoint area. Acceleratio has been selling this tool to various companies all around the globe. Some of the largest corporations over the world are using our tools to better manage their environments, and a lot of what you are going to see is based on our experiences with different customers and what we have learned by supporting them and helping them better manage their SharePoint infrastructure and their SharePoint farms. As I already mentioned, we have other tools in our offering. So today we are going to talk about SPDocKit, our ultimate SharePoint admin tool, but we also have a SysKit, which is a Windows monitoring tool that helps you monitor your Windows environment, servers, virtual machines, and workstations. We also have a CloudKit 365, which is our brand new tool that helps Office 365 admins to gather documentation and monitor their Office 365 installation. So a little bit of agenda for today's webinar. So we are going to do a short intro on how we are going to run this webinar. I'm going to show you how you can ask questions. Then I'm going to do an introduction of SPDocKit, like an overall introduction if you haven't used the tool yet. And then we are going to run through 5 different demos that are going to show you the key compare functionalities of our tool. Of course, everything that we show today is a demo environment, so for real test, I would definitely recommend all of you to download the trial version, which can you then use in your environments, which is very helpful because then you can see how you can compare farms in real situations. So we initially started our SPDocKit journey with a simple goal of providing you with a tool that can save you a lot of time in terms of generating documentation. So we started as a tool that was able to gather all the settings from the central administration, all the web applications, all service applications, all servers and everything, so that we could gather like an overall inventory and overall documentation of your entire farm. And that was our initial quest to help SharePoint admins all over the globe to be able to produce high quality documentation in a matter of minutes. The tool today offers you a lot more than just simple farm documentation. We do a lot of permission documentation, so you can go through all your site collections, all your sites, document libraries, lists, anything that you have in SharePoint. We can help you document that, so you can create a comprehensive documentation of your permissions. You can also create different reports that help you learn how permissions are distributed to your SharePoint objects, lists, documents, folders, you name it. And we can also help you to provide different views to your permissions. So for example, if you want to see where a particular user has permissions, we can help you with that. So generate a document that or report that shows you where Tony has permissions all over your SharePoint farm. We can do that for you. We have also introduced a number of new features that help you manage permissions. So if you have a SharePoint farm that you are managing and you want to streamline and speed up some operations that you need to perform, like granting permissions, cloning permissions from one individual to another, or any kind of scenario like that, we have a lot of tools inside SPDocKit that help you achieve and do these things very quickly. As I said, we gather all the settings from your SharePoint farm environment. So once we gather all these settings, we check for your configuration best practices. We determine if something was misconfigured or if you have some settings that are not properly configured. You can then easily compare and see if something was not properly configured. This is especially helpful if you are managing a large farm or if you have an outside vendor helping you configure your farm. Then you can use the tool to verify that project that was delivered to you was delivered in a proper way. We recently introduced a new feature that helps you configure best practices, so we understand that not every farm needs to have all the settings configured in the same way, so we give you the option to change the values of the best practices to match whatever operational best practices you have in your company. And now for today's topic. As I said, we gather all the settings from your SharePoint farms, and we store farm settings, web application settings, site collection settings, permissions, and web config files. So that's why we provide you 5 flavors of compare. Compare that gives you the ability to compare between not just different farms, but the same snapshot of the same farm over the course of time, and all the individual elements in SharePoint you can also compare and see if there are some changes that shouldn't be there, or if you want to track changes during the course of some time period. This is especially helpful if you're managing a larger environment where you have multiple farms. So for example, we work with a lot of customers that have a number of farms like development, production, Q&A, staging farms, and SPDocKit comes very helpful for them because they can then compare to make sure that these environments are as similar as possible so that they are configured in the same way. In case of any problems, they can then use our compare feature to detect potential problems or potential differences and to fix them in their farm environments. SPDocKit can be configured to run these snapshots on a scheduled basis. So for most customers, we recommend running them at least once a day so that they can have like a history of all the settings and all the configurations over time. Many customers like to mark some configurations as a good configuration, so at some point in time when they are sure that this farm is properly configured, they can then easily go back and see what has changed since that time. We also have a number of features on top of that, so you can configure these comparisons to be delivered to you via email. You can receive notifications if something has changed and things like that. So system can run pretty much on its own without you intervening on a daily basis. So you can just sit back and relax while we do your comparisons. As I said, today I'm going to show you 5 different flavors of compare for 5 different scenarios. And the first scenario that I want to show you is when you're comparing different farms. So as you can see on your screen, I have in this particular case, I have 3 different farms that are a production, staging, and development farm. What's very typical when we talk to customers, production farms contain the largest number of servers, which is normal because they serve production. Then you have staging, which might or might not have the same number of servers. And then you have development, which usually only has 1 server. So sometimes it's very challenging to ensure that these farms are identical. They are not identical in terms of number of servers, but many customers want to ensure that farms are as similar as possible in terms of settings and features they use and features they deliver to their end users. So what we have introduced in our tool is the ability for you to map different servers. So as you can see on your screen, I have 5 web front ends in my production environment, and I only had 3 web front ends in my staging environment. So if I want to compare these farms, I'll just select the option to map different servers, and this is going to allow me to do comparison between farms that are not completely identical in terms of number of servers. Typically, for many customers, development farms and staging farms might not be in the same domain as your main production farm. So this means that you're using different accounts, that you have something different in terms of where you back up your databases and things like that. So we also help you map these, so to avoid any differences that are like false positives. So if you're using a different set of service accounts for one domain and different set of service accounts for another domain, this would not be treated as a difference. Of course, every web application in SharePoint has an URL, and the URL can only be assigned to one farm, but you cannot have the same one in two farms. So we also help you map different URLs. So for example, if your production environment has a URL HTTP intranet and your staging has a URL HTTP staging, or something like that, we would allow you to map these two different URLs to be like the same URL. So let's run a demo now, and let me show you how you can do the comparison of this particular environment. So I'm going to jump into SPDocKit, and I'm here on my home screen. I have already prepared all the snapshots and all the configurations that I want to show you today, but if I didn't have that, if this was like a brand new installation, I would just go here and I would then select take snapshot option, where I would take a snapshot, gather everything that I have in my organization, and then I would do comparisons. I already did that, so I'm just going to go through our Compare Wizard now. So Compare Wizard allows me to select different flavors of Compare. The first that I want to show you today is Farm Compare. So I'm going to select Farm Compare and select Next. Then I have an option to choose what exactly I'm going to do here. And in this demo, I want to compare two different environments. So as we said, I want to compare production to development environment, and I want to see how exactly is this going to run for me. I also had another option where I could compare my farm with out-of-the-box farm, which is like when you compare your settings in your SharePoint against how a farm looks like when you just install it from out of the box, basically just running the configuration wizard. So this is the third option, and I'm going to show you the first option in the next demo. Okay, so I have a couple of farms here, and today I'm going to compare farm number 2 with farm number 1. And the Compare Wizard now offers me a couple of options. So it gives me the ability to ignore certain stuff that I already know that's going to be different. So like URLs, host headers, database names, business data connectivity namespace, and things like that. So I can just ignore these. Now it's offering me to map my different servers. So as I said, my development environment only has 2 servers. So it has a SharePoint server and it has a SQL server. On the other hand, my production environment has a number of servers. So I can map to see which server matches the other one on the other side. I also have SQL servers, so if I had more than one SQL server, I would be able to map these servers in the SQL mappings dialog. As I mentioned before, there is a chance that this farm runs in a different domain and that you are using a completely different set of service accounts to run these 2 different farms. So I have the ability to map my accounts from development or staging environment to my production environment. So this helps me eliminate some of the false positives that might occur if you are using different accounts. And then the final step in terms of SharePoint content is mapping of different service applications. So as you can see, both farms have all the service applications available provisioned. So you have everything from Excel services to Performance Point. And now I need to map my different service applications from my development environment to my production environment. We help you here by detecting same application types. So as you can see on your screen, the wizard has already detected that we have Excel in both farms, and that's why it's already suggesting that these two service applications should be mapped. Of course, if you have a more complex environment with multiple service applications and multiple service application proxies, you might need to do a little bit of manual configuration here, but in most cases we are very good at detecting which application matches the other one. We also, once we run through this wizard, we are going to save all these mappings. So next time when you do the comparison, everything that you have selected in the previous run as a same mapping, that's going to be preserved, and you will be able to use that in the future comparisons. And my final step for this comparison, I need to map different host names. As these two farms cannot use the same host name, I need to map different host names that I use for a development environment with the host names that I use for my production environment. So I already did that, and this is okay. So I'm just going to click next, and that's going to finish my wizard, and then the system is going to show me the differences between these two farms. So let's try to see some of the interesting things for this demo. So if I click on the basic farm info, it's showing me the differences between these two farms. So for example, as we expected, the development farm only has 3 servers, and the production farm in this particular case has 9 servers. So this is something typical and something that I would expect from a production versus a development farm. But what is good and what we can see on the screen is both farms are using exactly the same version. So in this case, this is Service Pack 1. So that's okay because we want my development and production environment to be on exactly the same patch level. And we also use the same edition, so there are no potential differences in features because we have the same version. As you can see on this same screen, environments don't have the same configuration database, they use a different one, but the system is not reporting that as a difference because we know that 2 environments cannot have the same configuration database, so that's why we don't show this as a difference. On the other hand, if you dig deeper and you take a look at, for example, farm administrators, you are going to notice that my development environment is missing some of the administrators that are available in my production environment. Depending on the use case that you have here, this might or might not be good, so we are showing you the difference so that you can take appropriate action or maybe add these people to the development farm or add these people or remove these people from the production farm. It all depends on what kind of scenario you have here. We can also go deeper and see differences between various objects. So for example, let's take a look at the web applications. So if you take a look at this dialog here, it seems that our production environment has 1 additional web application. So if this was a real environment and if I had my, for example, staging environment on the left-hand side, I would definitely want to have exactly the same applications in both environments. So maybe somebody rushed to production and created a new web application which is not a good operational practice. So this is an indicator that something maybe needs to be fixed, or you need to provision the same application in staging environment just to make sure that everything that you deploy is configured and deployed in exactly the same way. So this concludes our demo number 1. This is very specific to every company, so if you want to see the real power or SPDocKit in real action, I would definitely recommend you to run the trial version or the full version if you already have a license in your environment. One other typical scenario is when you want to track changes over time in a single farm. So as I said before, we can create a snapshot for you on a scheduled basis. So we can, for example, which is a typical scenario for most of our customers, we can create a snapshot every day. And then you can have a database of snapshots, and then you can go through all these snapshots and do comparisons of farm during the course of time. So that's very interesting when you have a single farm. So let's jump to demo number 2. I'm going to show you how you can compare single farm or the same version of the farm during the course of time. Okay, I'm again going to select Farms Compare. I'm going to choose the other option and say Compare Farm with the previous snapshot. And in my case, I'm just going to select the same farm, and this is going to compare. Both sides are the same farm. This was created on April 5th, and the other one is from March. So I need to detect if there were any changes. If you remember from our previous demo where I had to go through all these mappings and map different servers, applications, and host names, I don't need to do that if I'm comparing a single farm, because we expect a single farm to be exactly the same. But as you can see on your screen, there are some differences. So for example, there is something different in the farm, and there are some differences in the various objects like web applications, security, and things like that. The legend is available in the lower left corner, and you can see what every single icon means in the R compare wizard. So if I take a look at farm, I can see what has changed in this particular farm. And as I said, this farm, the left-hand side, the snapshot is from April, and the right-hand side, the snapshot is from March. So as you can see, somebody has upgraded this farm to a different cumulative update. So currently, the current version of this farm is running April 2015 cumulative update, and it's a completely different version number. So if you are having some issues or some problem has been resolved, this is one of the reasons why, because somebody has deployed a cumulative update and this farm has been patched to a different patch level. So this is something that you can use to track if something has changed, or maybe in a positive or negative way in your farm, and this can be very helpful to detect when some particular change has been performed in your farm and something has changed. I also have some additional differences. So for example, I can jump into the web application features, and I can see that some web applications, there are some differences. So for example, some feature was deployed in April that wasn't there in March. I can definitely see that this feature is missing on my previous snapshot. So if I'm having any kind of problems or something is not functioning in the farm, I can then use this compare wizard to see the differences between these two farms. And there are, of course, other settings that are different and other policies, and I can then drill down to all these settings and see what exactly is different, what is the same, and potentially detect a problem or something that has changed in this farm that I wasn't aware of, or something something unplanned has happened to the farm, or maybe something did happen as you planned, and then you just need to have a documentation that there was a difference. You can, for every single compare, you can choose which objects are going to be compared. So for some scenarios, you maybe don't want to compare some of the things that we offer you, and then you can use the options dialog to deselect some of the options that are not going to be compared and that are not useful. So if I jump back to my presentation, we can go further and I can show you some of the other features that we have. Both the compares that I have shown you so far are based on farm compare. So we are comparing pretty much all the settings that you have in your central administration. And you can compare everything that I have already shown you, like web application settings and things like farm settings and security and stuff like that. We also offer you two more detailed compares in terms of settings. These two compares are a site collection compare and web application compare, where we allow you to compare settings on an individual web application or site collection level. This can be useful because you can compare not just site collections and web applications from a single farm, but you can also go through the two different web applications from two different farms or something like that. In SPDocKit, we allow you to store your snapshots in the central database, and this central database then helps you, you can store all the snapshots in the same place and then just grab them from your console, and this is what I'm doing right now. So I'm on my PC and I'm connected to the central database with all the snapshots that I have, and then I just open different snapshots and show you different scenarios that I have. So for the next demo, I'm going to compare two different web applications. So let me just jump back to my compare wizard. So for this demo, I want to show you two different web applications. So I have two snapshots here and I'm going to select them. And I'm going to select my web applications on the left hand and the right hand sides, and I can definitely see there were some differences. So if I click on the alternate access mappings, I can see that the newer one on the left hand side has one additional zone configured. So this has changed between these two snapshots. I can see that this is different, and of course in the extended web applications I will also see that this new application has been provisioned on the left-hand side farm compared to the web application from the right-hand side farm. So I can drill into very low level of details and do the comparison between these two different levels. You, in every compare wizard, have the option to select only differences, to show objects that are different, to show objects that are equal, and then you can save the report that you are seeing on the screen in a PDF format, and then you can easily distribute this to some members of your team that are also interested in this particular comparison. The same, pretty much very similar wizard is available for site collections, where you can compare site collection settings. Okay, so this was demo number 3. One of the key things that we also want to provide you with our tool is the ability to compare permissions. So when you have snapshots of your farm, we can also create a snapshot of all the permissions, and we can also show you when the permissions change. So let's say that you are doing your snapshots every day, then you will be able to compare how permissions change over time. Compare permissions is one of the features that allows you to gather data about permissions and do comparisons. So if you are running snapshots every day, and if you are comparing data on snapshots, you can easily then compare permissions. So this means if some of your end users contact you and say, well, yesterday I had access to the project site, but today when I open the site it says you don't have permissions, then you can use the R tool to do the comparison of two different snapshots and see how these two different sites have changed over time. Or you can even do comparison of different sites. So for example, somebody mentions that he or she cannot access a sales site, but at the same time she can access the marketing site. So you can compare these two sites to see how these two sites are different and how permissions are given differently on different levels or different sites, different objects, and things like that. So let me jump into demo again. So I'm going to choose the fourth flavor of our compare, and that's permissions. I'm going to select permission date. In this case, it's this one against this one. Okay, so let me expand our site collections, and I have a Contoso site collection here, and I have a couple of sites on my left-hand side. If I go on the right-hand side and expand Contoso as well, you will see some differences between these two sites. So this one, this snapshot was created at 2 p.m. and then I have a different snapshot that was created a little bit earlier. Between the snapshots, I made some changes, so that's why we are seeing them. So for example, in the right-hand side, if you look at the project site, this project site had exactly the same permissions as its parent, and in this case the parent is Contoso root website, which is basically a site collection root website. So projects has a green icon. It does not have the small red square, which indicates that this is a subsite with unique permissions. So in this case, projects has the same permissions as the root website. If you take a look at the left-hand side, you will notice that the project now has a different icon, which indicates that this is a subsite with unique permissions. So if you click on both project sites, we are going to get a report. And the report shows us that the permissions are completely different. So for example, something has changed, projects got unique permissions, and 3 groups were given permissions on that side. So we have project members, they have contribute permission, we have project owners, they have full control, and we have project visitors, which have view only permission. All the other groups and users that previously had permissions don't have this permission anymore. So if somebody like Andrew Davidson contacts you and says, well, I used to have access to project site, something has happened, this obviously means that Andrew Davidson does not have a permission anymore because the permission has been revoked from this particular user. In the other scenario where you want to compare and see how projects are different from sales, we can click on projects on the left-hand side, we can click on sales on the right-hand side, and then we can see, okay, project members have contribute full control and view only on project side, but don't have any permissions on the sales side. On the other hand, you have sales members and sales owners which do have permissions on the sales side, but do not have permissions on the project side. So this is a pretty typical scenario. If you want to solve the problem, you would just go to either of the sites and go to any of the groups and just add people that need to have permissions in these sites. But this can be very helpful when you're trying to troubleshoot something and trying to determine how these two sites or these two snapshots or anything in your SharePoint is different and how the changes have been implemented and what has happened to permissions, especially if you have a larger organization, then you can easily drill down to individual objects and see which of the objects do have permissions, which objects have unique permissions, and you can then compare them. Permissions in SharePoint are complex topic. We don't have time today to drill into more details, but stay on our mailing lists, and I hope in the next couple of editions of our webinars we are going to talk more about permissions, about reports that we can produce, and how we can help you to better manage your environment. Okay, so let's jump back to the slides for one final demo. Is the ability to compare web config files. So this is more in the area of farm configuration, and it's especially useful for in 2 main scenarios. One is when you have multiple web front ends that might potentially have a different web config, or when you have a farm where you have developers deploying custom solutions that require some changes to be made into web config. And in order to ensure that you have web config for a particular web application and particular zone configured in exactly the same way, we provide you with a tool that helps you compare and show you the differences between different web config files. So during our snapshot taking process, we are going to take your web config files, we are going to analyze them, and then we are going to show you the potential differences between the two snapshots. So if I just jump into my presentation, my demo, I'm going to open my compare wizard again. I'm going to choose the web config file compare option. I'm going to choose my snapshot, and then I'll choose my two different web applications. This one has a default zone, and on the right hand side I'm going to choose a different one with the default zone. So what we are offering you and what we can do for you is we can gather web config from all the web front ends and all the servers that do have a web config file. We can gather web config from all the web applications that you have in your farm, and we can gather web config for different zones that you might have for your web application. So if you look at the right hand side, we have the ability to, for example, our SharePoint 80 web application has two zones, and then we will be able to compare if exactly the same web config has been propagated to both zones and that it's available in both zones. So we can gather the information for zones. What we do is we run a comparison on XML basis, and we detect all the possible differences between the two snapshots. This can be very useful in scenarios where your users complain that something is different. So for example, if you have multiple web front ends that are in the load balancing, that means that individual web requests are going to be served by different servers in based on your load balance. So in some scenarios where one of the web servers has a misconfigured web config, users that are being served by that server might have problems, performance problems. They might not be able to open a web part or anything custom that has been configured on the remaining web servers. So this is very useful when you want to make sure that your web config is configured in exactly the same way. What I have on my screen, I have two web configs that are not the same, and the difference is indicated on my screen. So this means that, for example, in my scenario, somebody has changed blob cache configuration. On the left-hand side, this option has been turned off, and on the right-hand side, this option has been enabled, as you can see. And we also have a difference in files that are being cached. So different file types are being cached on the left-hand side and different on the right-hand side. So this is an indicator of a potential problem. So if, for example, these two web configs were serving the same web application, I would definitely want to make sure that both of these differences are, or both of these files are exactly the same. On top of our compare wizard for web configs, we also do one additional thing for you. So our tool comes with a best practices analyzer that analyzes all the settings according to the Microsoft operational best practices. But we also have one best practice that does comparison of web files. So after every snapshot, we compare all the web configs, and if there are any differences in web configs, somebody was deploying some solution and the web config update did not work, we are going to see that in the best practices analyzer. So let me jump back to my slides. So today I have shown you how you can compare different environments, quality assurance, staging, production farms. I have shown you how you can compare settings between single farm over time, different snapshots, and compare these. I have shown you how you can compare different objects, web collections, permissions, and things like that. So If you want to check it for yourself, I would recommend you to download our trial version, or if you already have a version, we can then help you with configuring all the configuration wizards and stuff so that you can test your environment and see that all the settings are configured in exactly the same way. And if you have any questions, please send us an email. We will do whatever we can to help you as soon as possible. We can also talk to you directly and do a scheduled demo with your data, with your environment, and we can help you configure SPDocKit to work for you. Thank you so much for attending, and see you next time.